Mr. President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, I stand in the distressing place of speaking after Senator Brown of Ohio and before Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut. But I'm delighted to be here tonight because the issues are so important. We are in a place in the Senate that is frankly weird. And I don't know if people around here have gotten used to this being weird, but it is weird. It is not normal. In the Senate, we have essentially eliminated legislation. We don't do that any longer. The House sends over legislation, and it piles up in stacks on Mitch McConnell's desk. We don't legislate. Maybe 4 or 5 things in an entire session of Congress. That's weird. We're a legislative body. We're supposed to legislate. Why the elimination of legislation? We have smashed through and destroyed norm after norm, tradition after tradition, rule after rule. Why is that? Do people get some perverse glee in smashing norms and traditions? Do people get some perverse glee in not passing legislation when they're sent here to legislate? It doesn't make any sense. And then you look at the other side's 180, the 180 reversal, when they wanted to stop a Supreme Court judge. We heard about how important it was that before an election, the American people get to weigh in through their votes. And you shouldn't have a nominee appointed to the court in the months before an election. Here we are weeks before an election, and suddenly, whoop, 180. Why the hypocrisy? Did someone come and do one of those hypnosis parlor tricks on people so they would suddenly do the opposite thing from what they want to do? What is the explanation for the elimination of legislation, for the smashing of norms and traditions, for the reversal of the precedent on immediately pre-election confirmations? And we're even seeing intense support for a Supreme Court nominee when we don't even have a nominee. There's a phrase about a pig and a poke. You're not supposed to buy a pig and a poke. You're not supposed to buy a piglet in a bag when you haven't had a look at the piglet to see what's in there. We haven't seen the look at whatever, to use the analogy, the piglet in the bag would be. And yet everybody's already lined up to support getting that person through quick, quick, quick. That's not normal. That's weird. People don't ordinarily express their support for non-existent nominees. So what explains all this weirdness? What I think explains all this weirdness is that a very, very powerful group of very, very big special interests has glommed itself together and over years, over decades, has built up an apparatus specifically to control the court. Specifically. If you look at the Washington Post report on Leonard Leo and his Federalist Society perch and the bizarre little web of front groups that he has woven around that perch, you will see that they've documented more than $200 million flowing through that setup. More than $200 million. So here's how it works right now. When you have a Republican president, the president doesn't pick the nominee. A special interest group picks the nominee, the Federalist Society. Trump said so. That's where he got his list. His lawyer, Don McGahn, said so. He said he was insourced from the Federalist Society. Over and over again, people involved in the process say, we take our judicial selection picks from the Federalist Society. And when they say that, what do they mean? The Federalist Society is just a corporate screen. It's an entity. It does things on college campuses. It has think tanks here. But what does it really mean? It means that the people who are putting tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars anonymously into that organization are getting a voice or a veto in the makeup of the Supreme Court. They're not even having to show who they are. and the Federalist Society does the screening for them. You don't put tens of millions of dollars into a group and not expect a result. If you give tens of millions of dollars to a university, not only do you expect your idiot kid to get into the university, but you also expect them to name a building after you. So if you're going to put that kind of money into the Federalist Society, you're going to want something for it. To say that that's not rational makes no sense at all. It's inconsistent with human behavior. And I will tell you that if you took the names off the players and asked people in this room, should anonymous special interests with tens of millions of dollars to spend be able to have a voice or a veto in who gets selected to be a federal judge or a U.S. Supreme Court justice, screened through a partisan private organization? Anybody in their right mind would say, no, that's unacceptable, that is preposterous. Of course you wouldn't want that. If this were a liberal organization, my Republican colleagues would be running around here with their hair on fire about the scandal of secret donors deciding who's going to be on the Supreme Court and masking themselves behind a front group. And it's not just the Federalist Society money, it's not just the $200 million that flow through that network. Look at the Judicial Crisis Network, which runs the ads for these nominees once the Federalist Society has selected them. It gets contributions to pay for the ads. You know who pays for it? One person gave a $17+ million contribution in the Garland versus Gorsuch row, and somebody gave another $17 million to get the beleaguered Kavanaugh through, and somebody else just gave $15 million. Now, I say somebody else, but do we know it was somebody else? Or is there a perfectly logical case to be made that the same person gave $17 million and $17 million and $15 million? That's $50 million. You don't think that in their secret back room, wherever they arrange that, they cut a deal that they would have a veto or a voice in who got on the Supreme Court? That is a ridiculous proposition. And it doesn't end there. Once the Federalist Society has selected the nominee, and once the Judicial Crisis Network has done its thing to support them with millions of dollars in TV ads, and then they get confirmed, then come the Pacific Legal Foundation, or the Washington Legal Foundation, or the Mountain States Legal Foundation, or one of innumerable phony baloney legal foundations, all of which, guess what, are also supported by dark money. The anonymous money behind the Federalist Society, the anonymous money behind the Judicial Crisis Network, and then the anonymous money behind these groups, which then bring carefully strategized cases before the judges who've been selected and campaigned for by dark money. Then the dark money groups bring the case in, and so far, the 5 Republicans on the court have been very good about lowering the standing requirements so that those cases get right in and they can hear them. And then the case is before them, and what do you see? You see a dozen phony front groups with anonymous funding all show up as friends of the court. Amici curiae, they call it in court speak. I did a brief recently on the Consumer Financial Protection Board case, and we showed the common funding of the other amici who'd showed up. A dozen of them, all funded by the same organizations. They're not separate. And a group called the Center for Media and Democracy took a look at our brief and took a look at that graph and said, you know, I bet you we can improve on that with a little bit of research. And they put their scholars and their investigators and their researchers on it, and they did way better. They showed much deeper connections between the funders and the phony baloney amicus groups. Now, what if it's the same small group of funders who are running money through the Federalist Society to select the judges, running money through the Judicial Crisis Network to campaign for them, running money through these legal foundations to tee up the right cases to bring before the judges, and then running anonymous money through into these amici? What if it's the same big beast? It's less complicated than many corporate structures. They're perfectly capable of doing it. And with that kind of money behind it, you can bet they will line people up in this building. And that explains the bizarre behavior. We're not seeing bizarre behavior because we have bizarre colleagues. We're seeing bizarre behavior because we have a bizarre force being applied in this whole judicial selection process. It is an apparatus. And the reason they want to do this is because if they control courts, they can make courts do things Congress would never do. Even Republicans in Congress would never do the things that these special interests can get courts to do. Do you think you could get a bill through the House and Senate, even controlled by Republicans, that allowed unlimited corporate special interest spending in elections? Of course you couldn't. It would be a ridiculous proposition. People would get laughed at when they went home. There'd be town meetings. People would throw tomatoes at them. But you put 5 of the right judges on the Supreme Court, and they'll make it the law of the land for you. Unlimited special interest funding. Sure, we're for that. What a great idea. Getting rid of voting rights, disabling the Voting Rights Act. We voted in enormous bipartisan numbers to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. It took 5 unelected, lifetime tenured Supreme Court Republican justices to say, no, we know better. Racism is over. We know that racism is over because we're such brilliant people up in our little preserve in the Supreme Court. They found that racism was over. We didn't have to worry about it anymore. Pre-clearance didn't have to happen. Could never have passed. But get 5 on the court, and they did it. And then, of course, terminating the Affordable Care Act. We know that can't be done by Republican-controlled bodies because this Republican-controlled body failed to do it. So where do you go? Oh, right, to the court, where we can get a 5-4 decision that does things that legislators wouldn't do, wouldn't hold their nose and do. And sure enough, what's up? November 10th, argument on the case against the Affordable Care Act. And this isn't just a theory. This is real people. I've got 34,000 Rhode Islanders who have insurance through Health Source Rhode Island, the market that got set up pursuant to the Affordable Care Act. 34,000 who get their insurance there. I've got 72,000 Rhode Islanders who get their insurance because we took the Medicaid expansion. They wouldn't have insurance except for the Medicaid expansion. I can fight in every way I can to try to protect their rights here in this building. But you go over there to the Supreme Court, I should say, and 5, and now maybe 6 Republican judges can decide, we know better, we're going to undo the Affordable Care Act and take away all their protections. And this is going to hurt. We've got all those Rhode Islanders. We've got 2 of the best ACOs in the country in Rhode Island, accountable care organizations set up under the Affordable Care Act. Whole new way to deliver primary care practice. They are lowering costs, they are improving care, they are driving down their numbers, their patients are happier than ever, they're changing the way they're doing care, they are making their patients healthier at less cost with more attention. And it's a great experiment, and it's going to be undone by this, not because anybody voted for it, but because we've crammed with this powerful special interest apparatus behind us, people on the court who will obediently do these things when you trot a dozen phony baloney amicus curiae in front of the court to all in chorus tell them what they're supposed to do. Nationally, we got 156, we're a nation of 30 million people? We're a nation of 156 million pre-existing conditions. Of course we're not going to throw out pre-existing conditions. Even the president, while he's litigating to throw out pre-existing conditions, says, I don't want to throw out pre-existing conditions. He knows he can't get away with it. We know that it's stupid, wrong, and cruel, but pack the court with people who are listening to these big special interest types, poof, there goes pre-existing conditions. 11.8 million people on Medicare have saved $26.8 billion on prescriptions thanks to the savings in the Affordable Care Act. You'd have to be nuts to take that away from seniors. But put the right people on that court over there, tell them what to do through this big donor apparatus, and suddenly, boom, poof, Gone. Because they're accountable to nobody once they're over there. It's a lifetime appointment. Bridget in Tiverton is a Rhode Islander. She is in her 20s. She has a hip dysplasia that led to premature arthritis. She was in constant pain. In her 20s, she had to have a hip replacement. Well, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, because her dysplasia and arthritis were a pre-existing condition, she was able to get her hip replaced. She is now, for the first time in her life, fully employed, pain-free. She is happy. She is a Obamacare success story. Why would you want to undo that? Because you're a huge special interest and you want things your way. Martha from Cranston was uninsured. She had to have gallbladder surgery. She ran up a $60,000 bill with no insurance and had to declare bankruptcy. That's going to haunt her for a while because we won't let her clean up after that, even if it's a medical bankruptcy. But now she can get insurance for $283 a month, which she can afford, rather than over $500 a month, which she could not afford. So she is now an insured person and doesn't have to worry about that kind of unexpected bill and bankruptcy. These are real people, and what's happening with these special interests, I just don't get it. I just don't see how it is that people in this body can say that it is okay to have huge special interests that'll spend $17 million at a lick, $50 million at a lick, $10 million at a lick, secretly control who gets picked to be on the Supreme Court. In what world is that a sensible or even fair or even decent way to do business? It just isn't. It is indefensible. And yet that is exactly what is happening. And it's the same special interests that fund the Republican Party. It's the same special interests that are behind the big super PACs and the big dark money spends. That's why everybody has to hop around here, because if we say no to them on their selected nominee, then they'll say, well, we're cutting you off then. You're all done. And when they spend tens of millions of dollars on politics, it's pretty hard to tell them, well, we don't care. We're going to stand up to you anyway. We're not going to take your money any longer. And that's the pickle we're in right here. That is the mess that we are in. And we've got to fix it. And it's wrong to be in this position. It is wrong to be using this space on the court to send somebody over who is going to attack basic health care that we fought for and that Congress could not undo because the American people want it. And with that, I yield the floor.